citizens. This is the Constitution.
Listen, the most lawless people of America are in government. Anyone in government who does not uphold the Constitution, both state and federal, are lawless.
My name is Christopher Gronsky. I live in New Hampshire. Live free or die, you know.
He has helped Americans from around the world eliminate their income tax liability through his passport process.
It's like once you see the matrix, you can't unsee it. It's just there, okay?
Hey, welcome to Destination Freedom. I'm Christopher Gronsky. It's October 15th. Glad you're here with us. And we're going to go over some things. And we're in studio and worked all day today. Had a good time engaging with clients and such. So I'm real excited and I'm thankful that you're here. Tonight, we're going to talk about nonprofits, charities, or tax evasion, depending on how you look at it, you know. So, and I'll talk about the tax related things or what sometimes people struggle in or what they're doing out there and whether it keeps people out of federal jurisdiction or not. So first of all, I want to talk about the concept of charity. Okay. As a Christian and someone who follows scripture, charity is a beautiful social act, and that is giving to people when they have need. Okay, and so that's beautiful, and I think it's in Corinthians that talks about that when you give to somebody, one of the byproducts of giving to others is they give thanks to God for you. And that's a lovely response to giving to others. And whatever category we're talking about, financial or love or whatever it is, it causes others to be thankful when you give. I'm of the opinion that, contrary to a popular belief, that we're always going to soak the rich. You know, screw the rich. That's the American ideal today, and which is really the communist idea, which is, you know, from those, you know, from those that have, there's a phrase that I'm skipping in, but from those that have to those that need, you know. And so that's the old idea is, you know, you want to soak the rich. And you know who the rich is, really. What the rich always will be is someone that's richer than you. That's sad. And it may include you at some point because you're going to be, or you may be richer than somebody else. But that's not the way it is. And that's not the way scripture promotes that. There's nothing wrong with money. It's the love of money that is the root of all evil. It's not money. Money's a tool to be used. And I'm of the opinion that some of your money and truly, and I could even go, we can go broader and say some of your wealth, but we'll just talk about money in general. And I'm not defining money because, you know, we may be talking about Federal Reserve notes, but, or whatever currency or pretended currency you're using wherever you are. So I'm not getting into that part of it, but whatever it is that you work for, that you have, okay? Some of it belongs to other people. And it's not for me or for anyone else to determine how much of that is belongs to other people. It is yours to determine that. In the Old Testament and scriptures and others, you know, people talk about the giving of 10% or a tithe. Okay. As a Christian, I don't believe that that is what we are to be doing, is giving 10%. And let me just explain why. Okay. Scripture's clear that those that are Christian following Christ, that you are bought with a price. 100% of you belongs to the Almighty. You're a child of the Almighty. Okay. It's not, you know, 90% belongs to the Almighty. All of you has been redeemed. Therefore, 100% of your asset is, you know, is for you to determine what you want to give. See, the tithe determines the lowest or the bottom, but see, abundant sharing blows the top off. And I assert that the amount that you're supposed to give is what God is working in your heart to give. It could be a little, could be a lot. And as it says in Corinthians, he that sows, I'm thinking of the word. It's like abundant or sows. He or whatever is whoever sows small receives or reaps small. Those that sows abundantly reaps abundantly. It's just a principle. Okay. So the idea of giving is the powerful thing about giving is it is a walk with the Almighty. And it's quite exciting when you're in that place. And and determining in your own heart what you want to give, because the beauty of it is that when you see it land, when you see it goes to somebody and the purpose is just to bless them, it changes the other person's life. It really does. And I've been on the receiving end of that. Was a time in my life where I had great need. I struggled financially for a long time, and I've been blessed. There was a time when I was, massively in debt, and I've had people who love me give and take care of that debt and wipe it out for me in a single stroke. It was just phenomenal. I didn't deserve it, and yet there it was, and it changed my life. And so I'm glad now that with our work we do, that we can help eliminate debt with people. And I'm not talking about debt reduction, I'm talking about eliminating it. That's what we do for clients. But the beautiful act of giving to others, and that's what's happened in my heart is that I love to give these days because I can. And again, it changes your life when you give, and it also changes your life when you receive these uncoerced benefits, these blessings that come from others. Okay. Government gives nothing. Understand? It doesn't have anything. Governments produce nothing. Zero. Zero. Exactly. And then what is that all about? Why? Because what they receive, they take or receive by taxation. Okay. And all taxation, without exception, is collected under pain of death. Why do I say that? Look, just test it out. See if not paying any particular tax that allegedly is due you, if it's true, if you've used that those goods or services that governments are providing, and see if you don't pay it, if they won't come after you, capture you, you try to escape, they'll shoot you, kill you, or incarcerate you, try to escape, and of course they'll kill you. That's the way it works. That's why taxation is terrible in that regard. And really those in government should tread lightly, and they become addicted to that money. It becomes their charity and such as that. It is a sin. It's wrong. And so taxation for government services is one thing. And we can certainly make the case that they're bloated and gone beyond their need. But I'm saying when we're talking about charity, it is not the purpose of government to provide to anyone, to take the wealth from someone by force and give it to another. You cannot call that charity. That's not charity. That's theft, because you're taxing this one over here, taking the administration of it for yourself, and then pretending like you're giving it over here. There is no giving. That's just a distribution of wealth. And so you make this one over here addicted to your care while this one's pillaged. It's not right. It's immoral, and it should not be that way. And one tax in particular that I can think of is property taxes that goes for the communist government schools. It would be one thing if those schools were excellent, above, above reproach, excellent schools say, like, man, it's costing us a fortune, but man, are those children smart. They know this, that, and the other thing, and whatever. That's not the case. Just look at the American illiteracy rate when they're graduating from high school. 12 years of school, they can't point to where a particular state is or a country, or they don't know history, or they don't know the English language, or how to write, or how to communicate, or whatever. And they certainly don't understand concepts of liberty and freedom, what rights are actually, and how to how to hold your government to secure those rights. That's not being educated. And it was like Malcolm X that said, why would you let your enemy educate your children? So my suggestion on this particular tax, that property tax that goes to government schools, is if you love your children, you will immediately remove them from these government indoctrination camps. The 12 years of turning your children against the things that you find moral. All right. So let's talk about any one particular tax. How about that for a charity? And see, the amazing thing is that people will say, well, if the government didn't do it, then it wouldn't get done. Really? What a judgment of your neighbors, that they don't care enough. They don't really care. So we're going to force them. We don't trust people to do the right thing. We trust people in government to force the right thing, but we don't trust the right thing. Or another concept is ideas so good, like education. Ideas so good, we have to force it on people. Is that really what we're about? At least, is that what we're about in America? Yes, that's what America's about. Sad to say. And hopefully, or one day, maybe it would change, but that's not really happening. So anyway, so that's playing out. So we're talking about charity. And listen, education used to be a charity. What a beautiful act. Some of the oldest colleges and universities in America were founded by churches. Listen, hospitals were originally founded by churches. That's how they were started. That's how a lot of institutions were started, was because it was welling up in someone's heart. There was a need and they wanted to provide for that. Therefore they did. And then government's like, wow, people don't need us. Let's us tax people for it. And we'll allegedly provide those goods and that service. And that's terrible because it doesn't work. People do become dependent upon government. It gets bloated. You have all of this waste. And remember, the resources aren't going to the student or the one that has the need. It's the administration of it is massive. Take a look at any college, university, or whatever it is. The schools getting the money, the actual resources are not getting to the student to the end that they're benefiting from the massive amount of wealth. Listen, I'm not making this up. You can just take a look at it. Take a look at the quality of education that's in America. And that would be primary school or secondary and college. Look at all of them. And look at how much it costs for these kids today based upon the results when the NEA, the National Education Association, began back I'm guessing it was back in the 70s or maybe late 60s or something. From the beginning of that to today, how we doing? Far more money is in it. And then when you find out that you can begin to receive benefit from the property taxes, that jacks the property taxes up more and more. It's terrible. This is not a way to manage something that needs to be charitable. It doesn't cost that much to educate children. So we're talking about charity. Why? It's amazing. Even medical care and all that stuff. People will say, well, how can I survive if I don't get this welfare from government? Well, there are charities. There are charities out there. You'll be surprised how even like going to the hospital. And one of the best things that is going on in at least in American medical, the American medical community, is that if anything happens to you, you pass out, you fall down, you're sick, you're having trauma, if you will, in whatever capacity. They grab you, they take you to the hospital, they're caring for you. They're not talking to you about finances while they're making sure you stay alive. That I find is a moving, beautiful act. And of course, at the end of that, because you weren't, you were taken, maybe it wasn't your fault, maybe it was your fault, but now you've got a bill. And it's a lot of money. Why? Because listen, as long as third parties are paying people's medical bills, guess what? You think they're going to be high? Of course, because the one providing this service, they don't want to limit themselves. The one receiving the benefits, they don't want to lack in benefits. And the one that pays is the one that actually gets to determine how it's going to be administered, and they're the ones paying. Hey, a third party paying, what a great thing that is. Again, responsibility out the door. And then we wonder why medical costs are so high. But here's what you can do, and maybe you didn't know this. Don't be so concerned. This is what I tell sometimes our clients is like, well, what about Medicaid and Medicare? It's like, listen, if you got sick in some capacity, would you go to the hospital? Would you go to a doctor for your care? And most, including myself, would say, no way in hell. And am I going to go to the big pharma drug dealer? Or if you're not going to go for big pharma drugs, okay, then we're just going to cut out the offending organ. What? An appendix? We have no knowledge of what that's for. Cut it out. Oh, you have 2 kidneys. Don't stop drinking. Just cut one of the kidneys out. You got 2. That's why God gave you 2, so you can keep drinking. Like that. That's the way the medical mindset is. The natural mindset has different kinds of remedies. They look at responsibility, how you're living, how you're caring for yourself. So usually when I ask people about if you got sick, would you go to the hospital? And hopefully the answer is no. Care for yourself. And listen, there's massive amounts of free information online. You're not going to lack information, and you get to check it out and try it out, do things for yourself. And then there's other communities and people that are a part of those things that can help you. Again, that's a beautiful act. But what I want to get to is talking about paying for it. Here's something you may not know. If you go to the hospital for some reason and they come along and say, here's your bill, say, okay, thank you. Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to pay $100 a month. Or here, I have it on my credit card. I'll pay the credit card. Now, let me just tell you something. Putting on the credit card and you're going to pay it off, you're going to pay interest on that debt. Don't do that. You can just make a payment arrangement with the bank. I'm sorry, with the hospital. And you can pay them whatever you can. And you know what they're going to say? Yes. They're not going to say no. Because if they refuse that, then they don't get the funds that way. So yeah, you can say, well, listen, I'm really having a difficult time. I'll pay $25 a month. They're going to do it, and be responsible in that way. Don't do theft of service. And then it's much better to, rather than, see, you don't have to have insurance. You can just pay the bill. That's much better, because you're going to spend a lifetime paying insurance, hoping never to use it. And you and the insurance company don't want you to use it. And over here, the bill, you're going to pay the bill when you get it. Now, you can decide whatever you want to do to set aside money for, if you think you could afford medical care or, insurance, well, then just pay yourself, put it in Bitcoin, save up in that capacity. And some people do that. Anyway, responsibility calls you to that freedom, but you can make payments to the hospital. That's fine. And that works out sometimes too. But here's another thing you can do. You can ask the hospital, do you have any charities that are attached to the hospital that I can rely upon? And they do. And look, that's what they're there for, people who struggle financially. And you can go and ask the hospital and they'll provide. Now, what I don't recommend is government tax dollars for that. Now, it's not that that's not there. Of course, that's there as well, but that's other people's money. Remember, the people with the charity, they've freely given the charity. That's a much better, beautiful gift. No one's being forced to provide for you. Then again, there's another thing. If you truly have need, and if someone loves you, could set up a GoFundMe thing, and you could say, hey, here's my real need, or someone could do that, and people can give because they choose to give. And there's an honesty in that, if that's truly the case for you, is that you truly have a need and people can give. That is still also a beautiful act. And let me just say this, if you have family, but you don't care about them, and so you don't want to take care of your family, that's irresponsible. Now, maybe your family doesn't deserve your care, or, whatever, there's breakdown. That's calling you to that unity. Or maybe if you want to have that kind of care, be a part of a civic organization or a church or something, because then people can share burden with each other, not just in your health care, but in other categories, child care, all sorts of things. the Creator has called us to community, and that's an important part of how we live. We do better in community. We do better in giving and receiving from each other without the compulsion of government force. You see, so that's what we want. We have to do community better than the communists do. So that's part of that charity, and it's a beautiful act. It makes your society come together and be closer. You're more thankful for each other in every category, and I encourage you to be a part of that on both sides of that. It's really quite beautiful. Now, what in the title um, of our talk tonight here is I called it nonprofit or charities. Okay, now we in this community work very hard to remain outside the federal zone, and so there are people that are in these freedom communities that think that there's a provision for creating an organization that doesn't pay taxes. All right, I want to talk about that. Now, if you're interested in just not paying taxes, there are provisions in the federal zone for federal citizens and resident aliens to create what they call nonprofits. Okay. Now, what's that mean? I think it's funny that it's called nonprofit, because if a church is a nonprofit, and again, this is word art, they're agreeing to have no profit. And ph are not profit like you would ph let me see if I spell out right, pr OFIT, no benefit, if you will, no profit. But I'm talking about one that speaks for God. It's sad that it's called that, but that's what happens when you have a government charity. And here's what happens in just a regular church. The minister takes the bribe because his labor doesn't get taxed. As being a minister in facilitating the 501c3, he doesn't have to pay taxes on what he's earning by being the minister, but his congregation does. So he sets up an organization which they're all taxed, and then the money that gets to go to the church gets to be a write-off for them, and they do. And that's part of giving to a nonprofit. Now, churches are one kind of nonprofit, if you will, or 501c3. And there may be other types of organizations that they call nonprofit. Now, in calling something nonprofit, what they're saying is the monies that come in have to be eaten up by the organization. They can't have abundance of money after the organization pays all of its bills. That would be the profit, after the difference between net and gain. Okay. And so they take those, in a regular business, that would be the profits that you make from that. Okay. They don't allow the charity to have profits that has to be eaten up in the charity. And that's easy for them to do. So don't think that just because someone creates a 501c3 or that someone comes up with some sort of a charitable organization that it's not profitable. Okay. They can be making millions and millions of dollars. It's very profitable, but they're just doing the books in a way so they can continue to not pay taxes while they're doing the nature of the business they're doing. Okay. It ends up that this charity becomes a what do they call that? A pass through. Now we were talking, Michael, the other day, we did a talk where I was talking about this subject matter, weren't we? We were talking about, people who set up these charities and stuff like that. I think I remember this. I couldn't find the title for this before, so I'm not sure what happened with that, but I might have been one of those nights we had a hard time logging on. But anyway, so the idea is that people will come up with these structures. Okay. Now, let me just make it really clear when we talk about who has an income tax liability. Here's what the IRS says. Federal income taxes are due, and you have to file. It's for all citizens, all U.S. citizens, regardless of where they live, and resident aliens. That's what it says. And so that we understand that. And so anybody that is a U.S. citizen or a resident alien, you have an obligation to file and pay. But if you're not a U.S. 14th Amendment citizen, subject to the jurisdiction of, you may be a state citizen, a citizen of your state, and then you would not have any income tax liability. Now, some of these people that have done these processes or in other categories or people do that, they think that one of the best ways for them to do their work is to create some sort of entity, because and usually the reason they want to create some sort of entity is that because they believe that they want to get, of course, a bank account, and of course they want some sort of number. So they want their entity to have a number, and they can't figure out where to get a number from, because because the bank wants either a tax ID number or a social security number, typically in America. So they think that it's like a bad thing to give out that government number, the one that's called the social security number. Okay. But that welfare program, social security welfare program, that is not what creates a tax liability. You calling yourself a U.S. citizen, on forms or whatever, being a 14th Amendment citizen, that's what it is. Okay. That's what creates it. Now, you don't have to participate in Social Security. It's a voluntary program. But once you sign up for that, the government gives you that Social Security number, if you will. And now they've moved from it not being an identifier to being an identifier. So now that's what the government uses. And every citizen that comes, either a child that's born on some capacity to be a tax write-off for somebody, they are moving children quickly to have a Social Security number. The government uses it as an identifier. Okay, that's a reality. So whether the child's going to pay into Social Security or not, that's the future thing. And there's two ways you can use Social Security. One, by paying in, or two, receiving benefit. Giving out the government number is not how you participate in Social Security. That's not a benefit. That's someone looking for some information. And so that number may not be yours. As a child, you never signed up for Social Security, but at 16, when you began to work, you gave out the number so they can begin withholding. And then you're going to start filing because you want some of your money back. All that stuff is about taxation. So what happens is sometimes people will want to get that number, to get some number. And so they think that if they create some sort of a charity, or what they'll call their ministry, that they'll go and reach out to the District of Columbia, they'll reach out to the IRS, and they'll get a TIN or a EIN. And they think that they're going to remain outside the federal zone when they're going to the District of Columbia to get a number. They're only handing out these numbers to U.S. citizens and resident aliens. End of story, full stop. Okay? And if you're not in those categories, then you should not be getting the number. Then, because a lot of people understand that about the 501c3, then there's someone that comes up with, there's another kind of charity, is a 508. And so that doesn't even have a filing requirement. And again, is that outside federal jurisdiction? Absolutely not. Why? Because you're getting that number from the District of Columbia. This is not rocket science. So that's what you're still doing. The 501c3 and the 508 are for U.S. citizens and resident aliens so that they can have their charities. But the federal government is going to be the one that determines whether you qualify and are functioning as the, as the charity. That's what we were talking about last night, was the idea of that. There were 14 points that the CIA came up with to determine what a charity is so that they can control the church. And you can look it up, 14-point CIA, charities and stuff. And so they did that. So they looked at the Salvation Army and said, here's what they do. So we're going to define all charities, the 501c3, by what they do. And so you're only a religion that can get a write-off if you have these 14 points. That's a reality. That's not a hidden thing. The government shouldn't be in the charity business, folks. And so the problem is, if you're still declaring that you are a U.S. 14th Amendment citizen and you're functioning in a 501c3 and you're using it as a pass-through, my friends, that is called tax evasion. And the same thing goes for people who create LLCs and or partnerships of some sort, where the partnership, all of the funds come into the partnership. It has a tax ID number usually, and then they pass through to these other partners or entities. And then because they're getting their funds from the entity they created, they may not be paying taxes on that. And there are freedom-minded people, or people in this sphere of tax honesty, that think that's okay. Listen, I want you to know it's called tax evasion, because the IRS, although how you're handling the LLC may be right, but they're looking for someone to pay the tax, and the taxes due. Don't do that. It's illegal. And, and I'm not saying that what the IRS is doing is good or whatever it is. Government shouldn't be involved with any of this stuff at all. And yet the Constitution was written, and the federal government was empowered in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 to have exclusive legislative authority in all cases whatsoever. And so they want to regulate their charities, and they do. So that's what they are. Because I know of somebody who was charged with, what they call it, when you don't pay your taxes, or you hide money in order to avoid taxes. You know what they call that? They call it money laundering. Now, just so you and I are clear, the largest money launderer is the federal government, just so you know, okay? They do that all the time. But they want to make sure that you're not doing it so that they look righteous, that they're after money laundering. Of course, anything they do is never money laundering, or, because, those bums in DC, they never do, what is that called? Insider trading. They never do that, But yeah, they do all the time. That's how they go in, paupers, and come out millionaires. That's not an accident, So anyway, so the idea of that is, it's not what you want to do. Our clients, we have, when we don't need to create these entities in order to function. You can have your W-9 that shows you're exempt, and your W-8, not a W-8BN, but a W-8, of general W-8, a certificate of foreign status. And that's how you can, show that you have no liability, because you have to be you cannot be a U.S. citizen or a resident alien and think that you're not going to pay. Matter of fact, the IRS shows, and court cases have shown, that taxpayers cannot say that they are state citizens, anything like that. If you're a taxpayer, you have limitations, and the courts have ruled on that. That's what the IRS says. If you're not a taxpayer and not a 14th Amendment citizen or resident alien, then you might not have those obligations. So that's the kind of client that we have. So anyway, so I just wanted to just say that you don't want to be doing money laundering, because that's not good. You can't be having people give you money in your charity, and then all of a sudden you're transferring that into cryptocurrency, and think that those federal citizens that are contributing, getting a write-off, and then all of a sudden they're getting cryptocurrency. You can't call that not money laundering. It's not that the activity is necessarily evil, but federal citizens, if they're calling themselves a U.S. citizen, and that's the way they're writing it on their paperwork, that would be like in your passports, in your driver's license, everywhere you're asked, are you a U.S. citizen? If you're saying yes, then you have obligations to file and pay. And that's what the IRS says, and that's what they do. So that's part of that. I think we have some want to catch some of the questions in the chat. Make sure I can answer them. Let me see if I can get them at the bottom. Court cases will all end with tax evasion. Well, I mean, not all court cases, but if you're in federal court dealing with IRS, you're not at that point, you're not, or haven't been, challenging jurisdiction. And if you are a federal citizen, then of course you have these obligations. If you're saying under penalty of perjury in other places that you are a U.S. citizen, then that's a problem. When the Browns were being charged with tax evasion or whatever it was, the IRS used their passport applications, their own signatures, showing they were filling out those documents as U.S. citizens. That's what the IRS used to show that they had the tax liability. They didn't know they could do something different like we do. Cynthia. Hey, Cynthia, glad to have you on. Thanks, John. Cynthia says, what about creating private membership associations, an unincorporated association? Okay, that's a good question. I'm not a big fan of PMAs. First of all, the concept of saying you need to create a kind of organization, that's the first place, is that you don't have to do that. And when I've read these PMAs, many of them are just terrible. And so you create this membership, if you would. And so the truth of the matter is, the one creating the membership, they're the ones securing their rights. Everyone else it's a privilege, and therefore they're wanting to do an association, all that. Now there's no right of association, okay? No such thing. It's a privilege. You have a right to disassociate, but the privilege is being a member. Now, in business, I would never open a public business. I would always do a business privately. But again, you don't have to create a membership. Now, what you're really doing with a PMA, if you have people signing on, and you're really creating a contract, as simple as that. So you don't have to actually create an association. You can just have a contract on some level. Can be very simple, and that's really what you're talking about in that way. One of the problems could be is that the members in the association may think that they're retaining certain rights or something, and no one might be representing them in the private member association. And again, there's no problem with that. An unincorporated association, again, if you're not incorporating with something, you don't have to call it an unincorporated thing. Everything that's not a corporation is not incorporated. But again, I think it's a liability to create something. And again, why do they want to do that? Because usually they're going to go looking for a bank account. And that's why people want to create entities, is they want bank accounts. Then you'll be back at square one saying, I need a tax, I need number social. And many of these people that get those and do those things, many times, not always, they will end up trying to get a tax ID number, thinking that they're still okay because it's an unincorporated business trust or unincorporated associate, whatever it is. Usually that's where they go with that. Yeah, and of course you can create a trust, and that's also a contract if it's not made up of any federal citizens. And would you have a bank account? No, the trustee can have their own bank account. When you're doing things in the private, you don't have to have a separation of resources, okay? It's only in corporations that are tied to government or federal citizens that they want your business affairs to be separate from your personal affairs, because they're allowing you to do something. They're doing it either by statute or code. And that's why they want separations, or they want transparency. Because those are things in government. Private people can meddle their fund. They can be messy and all that. They owe nobody an explanation. So, can you do a PMA? Sure. But again, I think that it's not necessary. Then back to John. He says, oh yeah, what's up? Charitable nonprofit, that sums up the whole oh yeah, I agree. So, yeah, you heard that too. I heard that in my head. Zero, that's good. I don't know where that video is, but it's out there. Thanks, Jeff. One out. Here's a cheer out to Jeff Berwick and those videos. And then here we have, it looks like Leo Torex says, oh yeah, he says God doesn't exist. All right, thank you for that sentiment. All right, however, you may purchase male or female slaves from among the foreigners who live among you. You may also purchase the children of such resident foreigners, including those that have been born in. Oh yeah, so this is an individual who's butt slapped by the Old Testament, so he wants to get his digs in because God doesn't exist. Well, hey, thanks for the sentiment. I appreciate that. Okay, good. That's awesome. Anyway, so let's see if I get the next chat. Wait a minute. All right. So anyway, I appreciate that. That sentiment about the creator. No, I won't go into it. I won't go into it. That'll be kind of fun. But yeah, that's kind of a faith-based thing too, is that all this came from nothing. Well, that's kind of like God comes from nothing. Yeah, there you go. It works out. So from the invisible to the visible, it all works that way. Anyway, so well, I have a class for answering IRS letters. Yes, thank you for saying that. I have a class due for that. And I promise, I will promise that I will have that class done um, I am ordering my life in a much better way these days, and so therefore, yes, I will. But that'll be a class for clients. We can't help federal citizens and all that. So some clients have IRS issues when they come in, and so we want to give them all the templates we used, and of course we want to give them all the sentiment, and so that it doesn't have to be a scary journey. We have the IRS isn't coming up with new things, and so yes, I'll work out the details of that, but I'll probably do a first live class. So it's always uh, much nicer to do those things in a live sentiment than it is to, talk to a machine and do that. I mean, I sense you out there in wonder in, YouTube land. I can see the number 12 up there. There's 12 of you. So somehow that feels interactive, so that's cool. It looks like, there's a number one in the chat. Is there another comment there? Um, no, maybe not. Okay, cool. Um, oh yeah, there is one thing. I think it said here. It's other courts might not be reporting income derived from the bonds. No 1098-F filed. There's not really a question that. Yeah, listen. If you're being pursued by a federal court, then that is federal jurisdiction. The only thing that you would be dealing with is that subject matter, because those courts are going to govern U.S. citizens and resident aliens, and so therefore that would be the only thing on your plate. If you're talking money with IRS, you're not challenging jurisdiction. It doesn't matter the amount of money, because you're saying I'm not you that you would put on them their obligation to prove that that you are in the federal zone, either by your own testimony of who you say you are as a U.S. citizen, that's a 14th Amendment citizen, or that you're in the District of Columbia somehow like a resident alien. Okay. So if you're not residing in the District of Columbia, you would be non-resident. And if you're not a U.S. citizen, you will be alien. So that's because citizen and alien are juxtaposed to each other. So most people on the planet are non-resident and alien with respect to the District of Columbia or the federal government. And so that's proper there. And so if you look up in the instructions, like page 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there about who has requirements to file, if you look at that in a 1040 instruction guide, you'll see that the rules apply to U.S. citizens. And that further on down, it says these rules also apply if you're a non-resident alien, and both of the following apply. You were married to a U.S. citizen or resident alien at the end of the particular year, and you elect to be taxed as a resident alien. So a non-resident alien can have a liability if they choose to be taxed as a resident alien. That's what it says. That's what it means. And so that's part of that. And so that's out there. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share tonight. That's what I wanted to get off my chest and talking about charities this week. And look forward to you next time. No, man, good one. This was that Indiana Jones with the hat under. Let me see if where are we going? It's on the bottom. Oh, that's on the bottom there. Yeah. So what type of business do I suggest to use for commerce? I don't know. Do you want to be in commerce, whatever that is? You talking about, when if I sell a record player, am I in commerce? Was it because I'm using Federal Reserve notes? So I don't know that I want to be in commerce, whatever that is. I don't know how we define that. So one thing is I'm not in commerce. Maybe I am, but I'm not saying I am. And so there's that. And so, what type of business do I suggest? Whatever business you want to do, it's your busyness. So it doesn't really matter. You don't have to create an entity. It can be just you. Now, there's reason that people do create entities. Sometimes it's to stay out of probate. If you die and you have assets in trust or something, you want to keep it out of probate. That's one reason somebody might create a trust or something. But most of the time, people will create corporations because they want something. They want tax write-offs. They don't want to pay or be responsible for some things, and they want privileges. They want protections. So people want to create entities so that if they harm somebody, they don't have to pay or be responsible for it. Because if you harm somebody, cover it, be responsible, step up, pay for it. Sometimes you might, obtain insurance as a liability. That's a business deal because the insurance company wants to say, hey, odds are you're not going to have a problem. If you want to give us money, if you do have a problem, we'll pay. That's a business deal. And if you want to do that, that's fine. And you can do that in your personal capacity. Okay. And again, they're going to want a social and stuff like that. I get it. You need to have an explanatory statement with that or whatever, but you don't have to create an entity. And I don't recommend anybody do have employees or employers. Don't go the corporate route, because the corporate route is always the government route. If you don't want the government to tell you when you can be open and closed, and tell you when you can do business or not, or favor you or harm you, then don't do corporations. There's two things in the world, in my opinion, of the worst things in the world. One is central bankers, and two is corporations. I would eliminate both. I would make it illegal for governments to borrow money because it taxes the children of the future. If you love children, don't take on debt. That's how that stuff works. So anyway, no need to create something. Again, you can create a contract. You can contract with a partner. You can contract with whomever you want. Keep it simple. Keep it in the private. That's what I'd say. So, I remember when I was getting a post office box years ago, they say, what is it that, what is this, a club, an organization? I said, and so they asked me that question. I said, well, let me see. We sit around a lot. We do some chit chat. We're drinking beer. What do you call that? I wear the big funny hat, the one with the long green point on the top. I get to make all the big decisions. I call myself turquoise. That's what it is. I'm the turquoise. I get to make the big decisions. Bernd Sena, that guy gets to take all the information about money. And so that's what he does. We don't do president and all that stuff. That's not what we do, because we have these other things. I have the big chair, so I call myself BC. Some people call that the big cheese. That's one thing I do. So create those things. Make up your own things. They're not in the code for that. That's fine. Someone says, is Destination Freedom your business? No, DestinationFreedom.org is a website. But no one makes checks to Destination Freedom. No, I don't take checks. I usually don't take checks. I have recently taken some bank checks from some people, but no, typically some of the work that we serve people in, I call that American Supreme Law. That's one word. What is that? Well, that's it. That's the name, American Supreme Law. So I can call it whatever I like, but no, Destination Freedom is not a business, not at all. It's a website, and it's how I communicate with people and all that. So yeah, so it's not anything. Well, I'm not, this. It says, no, I don't try to take checks personally, but I do take cash. I do take crypto, and some gold and silver, all that. Sometimes special favors, but I don't like to talk about that. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Cynthia, for that. Did I get another one? There was a 4 up there. Is there no more, right? Okay. You all are too kind. Thanks so much. Hey, this is Destination Freedom. I'm Christopher Gronsky. I'm glad you're here. We'll see you next time. All right. Take care. Have a great night. Oh, you know what? Don't leave yet. Well, I do. I'm doing the backstage stuff too. Let me see if I can do this here. Hold on a minute. Let me see if I can do the exit. Oh, I guess that's how it works. All right. Take care. And wait, I'll pop my stuff out. Hold on a minute. Here's how it goes. Let's see.
I do not wish this life to pass away, but life presents such possibilities each and every day. I heard a calling that was right for me. I prayed for strength for what's ahead of me. Show me the way. Please show me the way. The sun rose high and burnt the night away. Who stood before me was my enemy. Don't tread on me. He's come to take away my liberty. I'd rather die than be a slave to thee. Don't treat me this way. I'd rather die than be your slave. I will survive. And you feel my rage. It's not a question of being brave. I'd rather die than be your slave. It didn't matter who shot first that day. They killed my brothers.